Joining me today is David Brooks of the Concord Monitor, who's really affectionately known as the Granite Geek.
Affectionately, I like that.
Hopefully your readers aren't. I want to talk about politics and technology, and I imagine this is something you've been thinking about for the last 36 hours. 48, 72 hours ago, we thought we knew how the world was going to evolve and turn out. No one, the pundits, the academics, the pollsters, probably even people inside the campaigns, predicted the results of the presidential election. How does our technology and our systems, even the gamblers,
Even
the gamblers,
So the predictive markets, the big data guys. So that, you remember a couple years or maybe election cycles ago, that was going to be the big thing. That was how you're going to know what people were thinking.
It's how people would bet.
How people would bet. And the idea was, if there's a little tiny bit of money, or even if it's pretend money on the line, it will make them be more honest than when they're talking to a pollster. And you compile all these bets, and that will give you, the truth. And the predictive markets were no better than most of the ordinary people who've been calling you on the phone constantly for the last month trying to get you to tell them stuff. And everybody is looking at this right now about what happened and what failed. I'm sure you've had guests who talk about this. The most obvious conclusion is that the assumptions about who would actually come out and vote are wrong, and therefore all the models you built, the mathematical models you built to help you take this small subset of data and extrapolate it to the nation as a whole, those mathematical models were wrong. Because they said, so for example, one of the cornerstones of polling has been that the more education you have, the more likely you are to vote. And therefore you use that in your model. So, if you've got X answers from people with college degrees, you give it a little more weight, and X answers from people without college degrees, you give it less weight. That didn't work apparently this time. People with less education voted far more than was expected. So the mathematical modeling and all the polling was built on was wrong, and that's part of the problem. And therefore, apparently, the people who were not expected to vote also are not the sort of people who participate in prediction markets, perhaps. So the prediction markets, the sort of the self-selection of who's part of it, appear to be wrong. So, this is a classic example. You have a complex system, and you can hardly have a more complex system than human beings, large numbers of human beings interacting. You have a complex system. It's extraordinarily difficult to mathematize it, to turn it into an algorithm, to reduce it to formulas. And
do you think the models will change? Will they adapt to this?
Sure, they'll change and adapt, but whether the adaptation they make, this is a backward-looking adaptation, right? Oh, we should have done X, so let's do X next time. Will that be correct? I don't know. Will it be closing the barn?
Or will it be a different error?
Or will it be a difference? How about that?
When I think about it and I think of modeling, I think somewhat of the different weather algorithms.
Right.
If you watch a lot of weather, you say, well, this algorithm is saying the storm's going to do this algorithm, and there's like 40 different algorithms out there. Will we have a poll of polls at some point?
Well, we've had poll of polls. That was one of the things that happened this year, in particular, was aggregators. And that they didn't run polls themselves. They looked at all the polls and gave them various weights if they thought they were good or bad, and said all the polls together say X, and the aggregators were wrong. Garbage in, garbage out to a certain extent. But the weather analogy is a good one, because when you're predicting what's going to happen with a very complex system like the weather, you can't have every single piece of data about it. You can't have the temperature and the air pressure at every point and every height above the ground. So you have to take a small subset of that data and use a mathematical model to say, this small subset predicts that the entirety will do X. That's the exact same thing that's been done with polling and with predictive markets, is you have this small subset of voters responded or behaved in a certain way, and I'm going to predict that therefore the total set of voters will behave in that way. And that we've gotten pretty good with weather,
But not good with
Not with
politics.
human beings. Human beings are more complicated than atoms moving around in the sky.
We got to stop there.
All right.
When we return, we're going to continue our conversation, and I want to focus on different ways we elect people, because there's something that's happening in Maine that might interest you.